As we jump into the very first kickoff, the one that's going to set all lineup decisions once you even jump into your FPPC and NFFC playoff-only tournaments, it is the Texans-Bills game. So go ahead and start us off with the passing attacks there.
So first thing you know is the Texans defense, I think as a whole, is the worst remaining group in the playoffs. I mean, they finished the year 26 in DVOA overall. J.J. Watt is going to be coming back, and apparently, no pitch count or anything like that, which obviously good for them. Apparently.
Yeah, I'm still skeptical.
We'll see, but, Jonathan Joseph's banged up in the secondary. Still not a defense I think as a whole we really need to fear. And then I think we do want to focus on the passing attack, especially for the Bills. I mean, Devin Singletary is very talented, had an every down role against the Patriots in Week 16 last time we saw him. But it's just, he has 3 carries inside the 10-yard line all season. I mean, when they get in scoring position, it's Josh Allen or sometimes Frank Gore. So, 20 touches or 20 touches, I get it. But when he's kind of priced up to 6,000 this week, I don't see why going down to Carlos Hyde would really be that much more of an issue. But anyway, passing game, Josh Allen, I think, is my favorite or second favorite tourney quarterback of the week. I mean, this is a spot where he could absolutely blow up. He's only on DraftKings, he's 6,500. Like I said, best matchup of the week. No need to fear in this Texans secondary in particular. And that rushing upside, when there's no Lamar Jackson on the slate, he is easily the most prominent rushing quarterback. I know Deshaun Watson can do his thing a little bit too, but just Allen, those goal line opportunities, I think we're going to see a potential blow-up performance here. Because look, he was the QB6 on the season, but with that said, only 2 games over 25 fantasy points on the year. Last year he had 4. I mean, he hasn't really put it all together yet, but with this matchup and this spot and them probably leaning on his legs more than ever, this could be the week we really just see him go off.
The last time we saw this Bills offense fully healthy and all playing was Week 16. And that, of course, was, yes, the Patriots were missing their starting slot corner, Jonathan Jones, but still, Cole Beasley went nuts pretty much in that game. And John Brown made the most of his targets count and beating Gilmore on that one play for a long touchdown.
Nasty.
So I still lean John Brown in this spot. But do you feel like the value, because Cole Beasley I feel like is also a good cash game value, if only because he's under 4K on DraftKings, and that's where you want to play him anyhow. I didn't know if you had a thought in particular on one or the other.
DraftKings Beasley, we're looking at 5.6. McKenzie's
is he 5'6"?
Yeah, McKenzie's under 4K. He's an interesting one. I mean, Isaiah McKenzie has been the Bills' number 3 receiver. They get him involved as a rusher a little bit, but we still see Robert Foster and some of these other complimentary guys steal snaps from him. It's John Brown and Cole Beasley in this offense. I think it's nice we have this condensed kind of target share between those guys. I don't see why you can't stack them both. If I had to pick one, though, I'm definitely going with Smokey.
I was actually thinking of Corey Davis. I don't know how I mixed those up. I knew I had 3.8 value somewhere. Also, quickly, YouTube is actually joining us right now. So welcome. And then again, the chat, if you want to keep up questions as we move along from game to game here, we'll be more than happy to answer them. For me, I want to move to the Texans offensive side, though, because there's really a tale of 2 stories. It is the Will Fuller offense and then the offense that's completely broken when Will Fuller's not on the field. And the way I'm seeing it right now, remember, we had that game that Will Fuller returned for against the Colts on Thursday night, and he blew up 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. However, that one, unlike his previous one, Week 16, that he left early injured, that game on Thursday, he practiced in full for 2 weeks. They listed him as questionable. Remember, it was a 2 a.m. Shefty tweet. It was a late scratch. Hey, he's just not going to be ready. The Colts game is more important. It's must win to get the division. So they're holding him out for that Thursday game, but was practicing in full ahead of time. So it was no surprise that they healthy scratched Kiki QT and then brought out Will Fuller, and he just exploded against the Colts. This past one, though, that he had re-aggravated his injury, or he actually had a groin injury, he was limited throughout the week, played, and then left injured. This week so far, we're recording this on Thursday, he has been limited at practice and it's supposedly a game time decision. I worry that even though he's out there, he still leaves early. And if you had to make me guess one, I'm actually picking that side as well. And as we know, Deshaun Watson, 7 yards per attempt this year with Will Fuller off the field, 7.4 ADOT with Will Fuller off the field. It just becomes something you don't want to attack at all. So therefore, you still don't mind DeAndre Hopkins for the target share, but really the Texans offense is something I'm looking to avoid entirely and rather just pivot to the Bills defense.
Yeah, the only guy I like on the Texans offense is Carlos Hyde at 5,100 because we have seen when guys have success against the Bills, it's been kind of on the ground. I mean, they are one of these defenses that, if you look at their DVOA, they're much better against the pass than the run. Now, That's what you want to be, especially in modern day NFL. The defenses that are better against the pass are also the defenses that are better overall than those that are good against the run. So nothing against the Bills, but with that said, I mean, we've seen them hide 20 plus touches, like any chance they get when they get up in games. Like that is a scenario as a home favorite. And to see him only at 5,100, I know Sony Michel is, I think, what, 4.3 on DraftKings? And
4.6, I believe, yeah.
4.6.
Which is still really good.
Cheaper. Home favorite, like I get it, similar spot for cheap. But I think he's gonna be the one with the enhanced ownership. Everyone remembers that crazy stretch he had last year in the postseason. I think Hyde is pretty much going to be like a lower owned version of Michelle, and he's got a slightly better matchup and definitely a better offense. But I agree with you. If Fuller's not in here, I just have a tough time getting behind anything. I mean, it's not just like Hopkins gets more targets when Fuller isn't in there, but he still averages more fantasy points per game with Fuller. Just that field stretching ability. Just
the offense literally breaks when he's off the field.
And it's weird it does, because Kenny Stills has that same field stretching ability, but we've seen it this year, we've seen it the last 2 years. Yeah, when Fuller's not in there, Watson just becomes a shell of himself.
Well, you spoke about Michelle, so let's go ahead and move on here to the next game, because I think this is a really intriguing game. The Titans secondary really hasn't been challenged whatsoever. Like, they had the game against Drew Brees, which was worrisome outdoors, but Brees still was able to spike 267 yards and 3 touchdowns. And what was really an efficient afternoon, if only because the Titans offense forced them into pass-only mode. However, for this matchup, I know Brady has only averaged, has been struggling this year as a whole, but I still kind of like the Pats passing offense in this game. Julian Edelman on Thursday said he's reportedly been getting healthier, which is great because, as we know, the past 2 weeks, past 3 weeks in particular, he's struggled. And Kill Harry is the guy I'm kind of looking at for value here, behind Edelman, if only because last week a season-high 7 targets was involved more because Edelman has been banged up. But it's just a matchup that I'm not worried about their secondary whatsoever. And I know everyone will flock to Sony Michel at that value, as you talked about, 4.6 on DK, but I'm looking to pivot and go to the passing attack instead.
Yeah, I mean, Adoree Jackson does look like he's going to return. He's played very well this season. I mean, he's been out the last few weeks with a foot injury. But even if he's back, I mean, he's a primary perimeter cornerback. Yep. He's not going to be in the slot with Edelman. And like N'Keal Harry, he wins on these jump ball contested catch situations. Like, I don't think a shorter cornerback like Adoree is really going to be the type of guy that would get us off of that play. I'm just like, we're now in the wild card round and we're still waiting on the number 2 pass catcher in New England to like really reveal themselves. And we thought it was Sanu after they traded their 2nd round pick for him.
And he's been bad.
So Philip Dorsett's also involved a little bit. I agree. Like, I'll take a chance on Harry before these other guys, but I don't know. I'm probably not going to have too high of exposure. I think the one potential game changer on New England is just the defense at 3,400. I mean, this is the first time in a while we haven't seen their defense just priced up an extra 500 over everyone else at least. And look, Ryan Tannehill has been awesome this year, like the most efficient quarterback in the league. Yep. Wouldn't it make sense if he came back to earth in a road playoff game in Foxborough?
I mean, that's my pick, honestly. And let's go ahead and pivot to the Titans offense, because I think there are a lot of question marks there. Because we know Derrick Henry, as great as he is, I wouldn't say he's game script dependent, but you can't really run the ball whenever you possibly could be trailing by 2 scores on the road. And then if you're forced to throw Ryan Tannehill, who's never started a playoff game, and now it's a road playoff game nonetheless in Foxborough, it's just super tough when you have Gilmore on A.J. Brown on the outside. Where else do you go to? Because, yes.
I don't know if we get that matchup.
You think A.J. Brown? Go ahead. You're wide receiver cornerbacks
we don't know.
Guy.
Bill Belichick is the single hardest coach to figure out this kind of stuff. Like, I remember last year in the Super Bowl, all years, Gilmore on like the more possession guy, McCourty on the speedster. Super Bowl starts and Gilmore's on Brandon Cooks. Like, even Chris Collinsworth was saying immediately in that game, like, I did not see this coming. So take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. With that said, I see them approaching this like they do with the Chiefs. When the Patriots play the Chiefs, they have Gilmore stick to Watkins, not get any safety help, try to win that one-on-one matchup. And then they pretty much bracket Tyreek Hill with J.C. Jackson or Jonathan Jones and then safety. So I think with A.J. Brown, who is the more explosive of the two, they put 2 defenders on him at all times and then hope Gilmore wins the matchup with Corey Davis. We might scoff at Corey Davis being this like relevant enough of a guy for Belichick to kind of change his coverage schemes for, but he has absolutely killed the Patriots in 2 career matchups. I mean, 3 touchdowns, obviously had the 2 touchdown playoff game when he was a rookie. Last year went over 100 yards, another touchdown. I mean, it was like a running, now Devontae Parker's in there too, with guys that have defeated Gilmore. But literally, like, Corey Davis was kind of the only wide receiver over the last 2 years that won against Stephon Gilmore. So I think because of that past history and just what we've seen them do against explosive receivers, we could actually see Gilmore on Davis.
And that's the value, 3.8, that I was talking about. Because that's one that kind of popped for me. It's going to depend on injury reports, but another sneaky tournament play I like in this game is actually, it's going to be ugly, but I actually like Tajay Sharp. So here's the thing is, if we are projecting for negative game script, remember in week 17, only with Khalif Raymond out, and that's the thing here. We have to wait on Cody Hollister. We have to wait on Khalif Raymond. But with no one else available, really, their 4th receiver only ran 1 route. Tajay Sharp was literally an every down receiver for 3 wide receiver sets. So if he's out there because Raymond, who's still in concussion protocol, and Hollister, who's been limited all week, can't go, and there's a lot of question marks there. But then he's cheap enough on both sides, especially on FanDuel, because remember, you're going to be able to do whatever you want on FanDuel. And FanDuel also 2-game slate, so you have to get extremely unique there. Stacking Brady, which I said I enjoy, especially on 2-game slates, and then running it back with Tajay Sharp as someone in negative game script playing an increased amount of snaps because everyone else behind him is injured is something I think is sneaky. And yes, it's taking on risk, but something I think is sneaky for tournaments.
It's gross, but no, I see your reasoning there. Last guy I think we need to talk about is Jonnu Smith, sitting there at 3,800,
that's another one.
Kind of going under the radar a little bit. I mean, I think
because of his 4 targets last week, but nothing.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, he's been that guy all year. He hasn't really had this huge target share, but we also know he's legit George Kittle-esque, like with the ball in his hands. He does not need many targets to make them count in a very big way. They lined him up at running back one game and just gave him the ball from there. So it does seem like, even if the targets aren't super consistent, they want to get him the ball a couple times a week. And just the tight end options under 4K this week, I think he deserves, a lot of potential exposure in this spot, particularly with kind of this Patriots, hurting on the inside of their secondary right now.
So let's say we're stopping here, and there are questions still coming in. Continue getting them in on YouTube and Twitch, and we'll answer them. It's just a lot of Sunday questions right now, so we'll get to those in a second. Let's say, though, that now we're stopping at the 2 games. You're playing on FanDuel. What stack do you look to target if you're only playing the 2-game slate?
On Saturday?
Yes. Of the 4 offenses available.
I want the Bills. I think this is, like I said, a potential Josh Allen blow-up spot. You can kind of, you wouldn't run it back if you think they're going to blow up with Hyde or anything. But no, I think you can go Allen, Beasley, and John Brown. And yeah, that's my favorite stack.
That's like, I guess Will Fuller is probably the way to go to get low ownership since the last we saw, he did leave injured again. Having said that, though, DeAndre Hopkins is still obviously going to be the safest route to run it back because he's probably not going to leave the field no matter what, and the targets will funnel his way if and when Fuller leaves injured. So, yeah, that's the option I would run it back. I'm still looking at, maybe I don't run it back with Sharp, I'm not sure yet, but I still like the Patriot stack in particular on Saturday-only slates.
Brady, Edelman, Harry?
Brady and Harry for sure I like. I'm toying around. I still like Rex Burkhead a lot in that game.
Oh, I like Rex too. Okay, I thought you were going to say Fade Edelman.
I like Rex Burkhead. It's hard to value him on FanDuel, but on DraftKings, I like Rex Burkhead a lot.
Like, James White just doesn't deserve to be over $1,000 more expensive than both these guys.
Yeah, James White's interesting for playoff-only contest that the lineups lock on wildcard weekend because we can probably project the Patriots falling behind the Chiefs, and therefore they need to lean on James White. So he blows up at least 1 out of 2 games played.
He has 3 career playoff games with at least 16 targets. I couldn't believe
crazy.
that.
That's actually an insane number.
I don't think this is the spot where we see the James White game, but it's possible. We've seen this before where he just wins these slates with 12-plus catches.
Yeah, I just worry about wild card because I really don't think they'll need him against the Titans.
And when Burkhead's in there, it just throws a wrench in an already confusing backfield.
All right, well, we have 2 more games here, though, as we move on to Sunday, and that's because the first game on Sunday is what we will consider probably the highest scoring game of the entire weekend because the Vikings are heading into the Superdome. Where are you leaning here? Some building blocks.
Oh, this is a tough one. I mean, there's one of these under-the-radar guys is going to make some noise. I think Traquan Smith at 4K is interesting. I mean, Ted Ginn has become like a part-time player over the last 3 weeks. Hasn't even reached 40% snaps in those games. Drew Brees put so much of his target share just through Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, and Jared Cook. So, like, there's a low floor here. But, Traquan, he does get a good amount of snaps in the slot. And more than anything, like, who cares where they're lining up? This Vikings secondary in this game, the Vikings secondary, I think, is the worst, like, positional unit from either team. And that's cornerback group specifically.
Yeah, I agree.
No disrespect towards Harrison Smith. But, yeah, man. And on the other side of the ball, all right, one thing to note with BC Johnson, because I know in these smaller slates we're looking for these part-time guys that could be underowned and all this. BC Johnson's fine, but they actually use him behind Irv Smith Jr. So, like, they're a primary two tight end offense. Vikings are a lot more like the Eagles when they have a couple more of their wide receivers than people give credit to. I mean, Goddard and Ertz start for the Eagles. Rudolph and Irv Smith basically start for the Vikings. So, whereas, some people might like BC at 3.5, honestly, there's worse punts than Irv Smith at 2.7.
Irv Smith's not a bad one. It's just tough because I don't know how the Vikings hang in this game, honestly. Yes, like in the Superdome, Kirk Cousins can probably be efficient, and he struggled the most against divisional opponents and in prime time this year, which he has historically done. So there should be some value on offense here via the Vikings pass catchers. But outside of the ancillary weapons that you talked about, like Lattimore and most likely Stephon Diggs, Lattimore has only allowed a touchdown since week 2, just one since week 2. Averaged 2 catches against in coverage since week 3. He's truly been shut down. Plus, they added Janoris Jenkins. That's the wild card in the playoffs here because he didn't get cut for performance reasons. He was PFF's number 3 corner the time he got released, and then signed with a team that really just needed a second shutdown corner since the Eli Apple project hasn't really worked out for them.
He's hurt now too.
Yeah, so that's why Jenkins is that's such an X factor for the entire playoff run for the Saints. But I don't know where to go because Thielen, we know, hasn't been healthy. You can't trust Thielen, which makes him a tournament play, but you can't really trust him. And so if you're leaning on Irv Smith and Olabisi Johnson, then that's just, that's tough to argue.
That's tough. I mean, with that said, though, I don't think the Saints are incredible on run defense. I mean, they allowed Carlos Hyde got like 85 yards in week 1. Mm-hmm. No one has topped that the rest of the season. We've seen, Zeke and some truly really good running backs that get fed the ball just not have nowhere to go against this defense. I think the Vikings' best path to victory is try to throw the ball because, I mean, they were without Eli Apple, Marcus Williams, Von Bell all last week in a game that they were playing to win. So those guys, I mean, I'm sure they're going to do everything they can to suit up this week, but when 3 of your 4 secondary starters are at less than 100%, pretty notable. Like you said, I do like the Thielen call. We should be seeing a Lattimore on Stephon Diggs. I wouldn't be terrified of that matchup because with Diggs, especially the way they use him, I mean, he just needs to win 1 or 2 of those plays, and he's going to be, streaking down the field. So Cousins, Diggs, Thielen, like tournament stack, but I don't love it.
And the Vikings funneled passes to running backs more whenever Thielen was off the field. But now with Thielen back healthy, and remember, we haven't seen Dalvin Cook healthy since like week 11. And now he's had 14 days off, if not a little more. So he should be healthy, but the question is, like, can you run against the Saints, which, as you said, like that is their strongest particular part of that unit. Yep. And so I don't think you can. So that's why I've been struggling with Dalvin Cook, not only in these 4-game slates, but also in the playoff-only leagues, because it's just like that feels like one game, 15 touches and done, and it's just a waste of time, in my opinion.
And Madison's also going to be active.
And healthy, most likely, yeah.
Cook's been the bell cow, but there is a chance that if he's not 100%, I mean, it could be a little bit split.
The Mike Boone roller coaster is done. It was a fun 2 weeks. It was a tough 2 weeks, but a fun 2 weeks.
Cook, Kamara, and Henry are the 7K plus running backs. Which one do you like the most?
Kamara for me.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah. We've seen the floodgates open for the touchdown regression.
Yeah,
but it just sounds like both of us like the Saints really in this game.
Oh, yeah.
And then my quick pivot before we move on to the last game, my quick pivot is, and it's crazy, but I genuinely think Taysom Hill at the tight end spot on FanDuel is something worth considering in short game slates.
Ooh.
I know. It's a pivot from Jared Cook. Jared Cook's touchdown floor, we know, especially the past 3 weeks, how he's been more involved in the red zone. That's something to be scared of if you're pivoting from it, especially in 2-game slates. But Taysom Hill, like that's the way you unlock.
I mean, we're talking about it's Kamara, Michael Thomas, and Jared Cook, but behind that, like Taysom Hill could easily be the number 4 option.
You can't do it on DraftKings because he's still a quarterback, right. But on FanDuel, I love Taysom Hill
tight
a
end
lot.
Spot? Yeah, let's do it.
But let's get on to the final game because there are a lot of intriguing pieces here. And when I was breaking down this game, I just don't see how either side stops the other. Like, the injuries should have mounted for the Eagles by this point, rendering them as a lowly offense. But the fact is Carson Wentz continues making magic with absolutely nothing around him. We had the Boston Scott emergence in place of Miles Sanders, who is day-to-day, and I think he'll be healthy and ready to go. And quite frankly, Josh Perkins and Dallas Goedert have done enough without Zach Ertz that I think those are two values in this game. So go ahead and lead us off. Where do you think value is here? Who's someone you want to get in no matter what in this game?
I love the Perkins call. He's 2,900, and this guy, he's a wide receiver. I mean, they used him more than J.J. Arcega-Whiteside last week. I mean, it's Greg Ward, Robert Davis, and Josh Perkins pretty much in their 3 wide receiver sets right now, particularly if Zach Ertz remains out. But that's my big problem here. I mean, this offense is already bare as could possibly be. Boston Scott, great job last week, man. But Miles Sanders now has this ankle injury. Ertz has the ribs and back. Like, who knows how close he's going to be 100%. I mean, look, they've scored more than 24 points against the Dolphins, Redskins, and Giants since Week 8. That's it. I think there's a little bit of recency bias with this offense from last week, because I don't know that they're going to move the ball consistently on Seattle, and we saw the Seattle defense hold them to 9 points in Philly earlier this season. They are banged up, but they should be getting Diggs back. They should be getting Clowney back. So getting healthy at the right time. Meanwhile, on the Philly side of the ball, defensive side of the ball, I'm 100% with you. I don't know how they stop the Seahawks team, especially if the Seahawks, like, please pass. The Eagles secondary was never unit to fear to begin with, and now they had their top 3 cornerbacks hurt again. Like, there's no way they can cover Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and amazing value, David Moore at 3.4K. Just throw the ball, guys, please.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We don't know if they're going to throw, and that's why. But even if they do or whether they don't, I still think Travis Homer is the value I'll be targeting here on DraftKings in particular.
It's not even close between Marshawn with the same price points.
Yeah, and Marshawn, I realize, like, Marshawn is their goal line back. Like, Travis Homer probably should have been pulled for his little rushing touchdown there in Week 17. But for the price point, like, the big thing here, if they do throw, remember, Travis Homer last week with Marshawn Lynch, with Chris Carson and Rashad Penny both sideline. 50 snaps, but more importantly, 30 routes, and got every single running back target. So if they do throw, he is a contrarian way to stack Russell Wilson, and then you can double stack him, picking between Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. Do you have a lean there, which one or the other?
Nah, I haven't had a lean all season pretty much.
It's just impossible to pick.
It just goes back and forth. I think they're both, perfectly in play. I'm telling you, David Moore, because this has not been a clear-cut number 3 wide receiver situation ever since Josh Gordon joined the crew. He's suspended. Malik Turner is in concussion protocol, and now Jerron Brown's already been ruled out with a knee injury. So David Moore is truly now their number 3 wide receiver, locked in there. Explosive, super souped up, spark athlete. I think it's fair to suggest the Eagles' bad secondary is going to focus their attention on Metcalf and Lockett. And, like, how many games have we seen where Russ just, feeds these kind of complementary options and they end up balling out? So David Moore is my favorite, I think, under 4K value.
David Moore, interesting. Okay. Hollywood actually asked, because he has questions about this game, Carlos Hyde over Lockett in general. I mean, Carlos Hyde will actually, we know Carlos Hyde is going to get more touches, but Carlos Hyde is actually touchdown dependent. It really depends what Lockett you get. That's the whole point here, is that Lockett is super tough to predict.
Yeah.
Like, you can't even project for him.
At the price point differences, saving like 2K with Hyde, give me Hyde in from that scenario. But from a pure projected points, I'd still go Lockett, I think. I mean, we've seen the blow-ups. Like, all he needs is just the target. It's just a matter of where he can get them. And I really hope that the Seahawks are just smart enough to realize that they should attack the Eagles where they're worst, which is the secondary.
And then we have Mo Doyle asks, if you can only choose one, Miles Sanders, James White, or one of these Seattle receivers.
I think
Miles Sanders, I'll say that Miles Sanders now, the practice reports are just coming in, and he's DNP for the second day in a row now. They projected him to do the walkthrough yesterday on Wednesday, and then he didn't. He was downgraded, which is not good.
We saw Jordan Howard play 1 snap last week.
And honestly, since we're talking about this now, if it does come to that point, I didn't think it'd come to that point, but if it does, where Sanders is ruled out for Sunday, you're just loading up on Boston Scott. I don't think you even worry about Jordan Howard at all. Not even as like a risky tournament play. You just take the Boston Scott touches and call it a day.
Howard didn't have a touch last week because he wasn't even cleared for contact until last week. Like, he's an inside the tackle runner that just had a very severe shoulder injury. That's not just something you can realistically play effectively through, I think. So yeah, and even if Sanders, honestly, man, like we just saw them have Howard active for emergencies. I can see them doing the same thing with Sanders. So it might, honestly, like the move might be Boston Scott and hope Sanders is active.
Okay, we talked about all games now. So quickly, I just want to ask you, so Sunday, what is your favorite stack? Is it the Saints? Or do you like the Seahawks as a
Honestly,
contrarian?
I like contrarian Vikings.
Contrarian Vikings,
I
okay.
think Cousins and Thielen. If you want to ignore Diggs, grab some Irv Smith.
Irv Smith, okay. And then your favorite tournament play over the weekend. Is it David Moore?
David Moore, man.
That's super interesting. No, I like it. I haven't heard anyone talking about David Moore.
I really think David Moore is talented, and it was more last year he got more opportunities, and this year, like, he was banged up to start the year. They brought in Brown. Like, they've just been rotating at this number 3 spot in a run-first offense, so he was never on the fantasy map all year, but literally, like, workload change in Week 17, I don't think it's being priced into his salary at all, and like could not ask for a better matchup.
And mine is Taysom Hill and FanDuel at the tight end position. And then on DraftKings, I still actually like Tajay Sharp. Adam Humphries just got ruled out. Still waiting on Khalif Raymond to clear concussion protocol. He'd have to do it 24 hours earlier than normal. And we have to wait on Cody Hollister. But if they're only going in with 4 available receivers, I would imagine it's the same thing they did last week. And they're just running the same 3 guys out there for every snap, especially if they're playing behind. If those guys are healthy, then I think pivoting to Davis in tournaments is the way to go.
Why Tajay over Traquan? Because I feel like they're both on the outside looking in the top 3, and like, why pick the Saints? That's how I'm looking at it.
That's a good point. Will he play? Traquan will probably play. I'm figuring this down the fly right now in my head. Traquan will play more snaps most likely. They're both just thin tournament options, and if I'm guessing game script, that game scoring is going to be higher for sure. The Saints game. I like the Patriots scoring a lot of points, to be honest. That's why I like Brady stacks. So that's why I prefer getting the other offense that I assume will be throwing a lot. And I assume the Titans will be throwing a lot efficiently, but I just really feel like they're playing from behind. I think they're outmatched in that game, honestly. Yeah. And it's not the Patriots we've seen all year, but man, it's just that matchup is brutal.
He's definitely got the better projected game flow, even if Traquan's overall environment might be more fancy.
Like I said, they're 2 thin tournament plays, so they're probably not smart plays to begin with. But yeah, I like Sharp. Cool. With that being said, though, that's about it. That's 4 games.
We did
4 games, 30 minutes. I think we covered it all here. So we will be back next week, the last time, for another 4-game slate as we have the divisional round. But until then, Ian, what else do you have coming out this week?
DFS breakdown earlier today. Mismatch manifesto went out this morning, and I'm gonna break down all the teams, figure out different like position groups. I'll figure out who the most complete team is right now. Like, obviously, we know the quarterbacks kind of have so much to do with this, but I'm gonna look at 8 different kind of stat. It'll be out Friday. Check it out. It'll be good.
And then Friday evening, I'll have the injury report overnight ready to go for Saturday morning, talking about some pivots and whatnot for the slate, and having some playoff-only advice in there as well. Also, my playoff-only top 50, which I'm still adjusting right now as I'm still figuring out wildcard predictions, is up on Rotoworld as well. So,
and the matchup pod with Josh.
And the matchup pod with Josh that we're about to jump into right after this. So until then, thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next week, and we will see you then.